We will start our questioning, and once again, I would like to remind our candidates that you will have 1 minute to answer each question. Following each candidate's answer, each candidate will also have a 30-second rebuttal. Our first question tonight, we will start on a rotating basis with Candidate Rice. Candidate Rice, do you support the Kansas income tax cuts that were put in place 2 years ago?
You know, that's kind of a difficult question, but, you know, I think that somehow we have to get lower taxes. That goes towards building a good economic program for your community. That helps build houses, that helps build your schools. Putting more money in your pocket and less money in government's pocket is a good thing. Now, whether this income tax thing, the way they've got it structured, I'm a bit concerned about maybe it's too much, too fast, and I think I've talked to several legislators about that, and you know, there might be a possibility that they would have to delay that, but I think that's an important goal to eventually, sometime in the future, to have Kansas as a free of income tax. And so, you know, I'd say I support it, but only to a point that it doesn't bankrupt the state.
Thank you, Candidate Rice. Same question to Candidate Francis.
Could you repeat it, please?
The question was, do you support the Kansas income tax cuts that were put in place 2 years ago?
You know, I think we're going to have to see what happens over the next 6 months. Currently, the revenue that they estimated was $330 million short this year off of their estimates. You know, the governor's convinced that the growth is going to come through to cover that in the next year. I think we've definitely got another year to find out on that. One of the things that I'm concerned about as I talk to people throughout this community is property taxes. You know, as the government continues to go from crisis to crisis, often we shove services down to the locals. We don't give them the money to fund them. And also we have a tendency once in a while to do a nice little tax cut for the locals that makes us look like a tax cutter. And it was really the locals that took the cut in revenue.
That's time, Candidate Francis. Now we will enter into our rebuttal phase. Candidate Rice, you have up to 30 seconds if you would like to add to your comments or rebut anything, Candidate Francis.
I think I'm fine. I just, you know, I support it to a point.
All right. Candidate Francis, you have 30 seconds. Candidate Francis passes. All right. The next question is kind of conjoins with the first question. What would you do to keep state taxes low without pushing the burden down to the cities and counties? We will start with Candidate Francis.
You know, one of the things that I learned as a county commissioner is we always need to try to make government work smarter. And that's the best thing that we can do to keep your taxes low. When I was a county commissioner, for instance, one of the things we did to keep the property tax low was we did a lot of fund consolidation. When I became a county commissioner, everybody had their own little budget. They all had to have their own little reserve. So the smartest thing we can do, again, is to look at smart ways to make government more efficient. Another thing, though, that we also need to do is there are some services that government provides that are a direct benefit to certain industries. And there may be instances in that part where the industries need to pay for the assistance that they're getting from the state.
Thank you, Candidate Francis. Candidate Rice.
In order to keep taxes low, was that the question?
What would you do to keep state taxes low without pushing the burden down to the cities and counties?
Okay, you would do what I did most of the day today. I sat at the county courthouse and we went through budgets. We went through budgets line item by line item. And, you know, you have to do that. You have to use a fine-tooth comb. And I have a feeling that in the state level that's not being done. I don't think there's probably time, perhaps. There's not enough personnel. But I think that's something that needs some serious consideration, is that you look at each one of those budgets and identify some of what you believe to be the overages and start to eliminate those. So you have to take one budget at a time and proceed that way, and that will, in effect, lower taxes.
Thank you, Candidate Rice. We now enter our rebuttal phase, starting with Candidate Francis. You have 30 seconds.
You know, one other thing I was thinking about, as many of you know, I own Spencer Brown's Coffee House. I have not yet once had a sales tax audit. I don't think the government needs to be in there with a heavy hand, you know, beating everybody up over little things. But I do think once in a while you have to wave the flag. I think that some of our collection efforts have been really negligent at the state. I think that's something we can do. Again, we don't want to have a heavy hand. We want it to be more educational like it is in the restaurant business. We're always...
That is time, Candidate Francis. Candidate Rice, 30 seconds.
One last quick suggestion. I've been involved with this lesser prairie chicken listing, and I do not approve that. It's going to kill the economy of Seward County if that continues, but I think that you could take a look at some of those organizations like Fish and Wildlife that are promoting that and perhaps cut out 25% out of our budget to stop that nonsense that's going on.
Thank you, Candidate Rice. Our third question this evening, we will start with Candidate Rice. Do you support Common Core standards, and if you support it, what will you do to protect it? If you don't support Common Core standards, what will you do to repeal it? Candidate Rice, you have 1 minute.
You know, that's something that I have thought about for a long time. Depending on who you listen to, what group you listen to, it's pro and con either way. It doesn't really make a whole lot of difference to me. The thing is, as your representative, I need to represent you, your opinions, and your voice. So I would say whatever you folks decide is best for Kansas and for your children, that's what I need to know, so I'll know how to vote when that question comes up. But as far as I support it or I don't, it doesn't make any difference. You know, I can go either way on it.
All right. Candidate Francis.
You know, Common Core is the current buzzword in education. It's the thing everybody loves to hate. I think without a doubt from some of the things I've heard, there needs to be some changes to Common Core. But, you know, one of the things I hate in education, or what's been going on in the last few years, is we start out with the Shirley method. Then we go to No Child Left Behind. Now we're going to Common Core. And every time somebody gets upset, we want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and start all over. I think that's wrong. I think we need to have the Board of Education, we need to have educators look at it, we need to tweak the system, we need to continue to make it better, and we need to move forward. We need to focus, get back to the basics of educating our children.
Thank you, Candidate Francis. Candidate Rice, you have an additional 30 seconds if you choose to use it.
No, I'm good.
Candidate Francis, you have 30 seconds if you choose to. Okay. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to our next question, and this one was just handed to me. What can be done to take the tax burden off of property owners? And then we will start with Candidate Francis. What can be done to take the tax burden off property owners?
Well, this one isn't going to be very popular. You know, whenever you're running for election, you're never supposed to talk about taxes unless we're going to cut them. You know, everybody loves a tax cut. There's three types. Policy used to be you had your income tax, you had sales tax, and you had property tax. It was a three-legged stool. They were all supposed to be equal. That's no longer the case. We're putting more of a burden on sales tax and conversely more of a burden on property tax. Somebody has to pay for it if we want the services from government. So with that question, the only thing to do is to increase the percentage that's coming from income tax. I do not think there's a will for that at Topeka. I think we need to let this experiment go forward and see where we are.
Thank you, Candidate Francis. Candidate Rice.
You know, I think a fantastic way to lower your taxes is expand your tax base. That means building new homes, that building industry, you know, growing what grows your tax base. You know, a fine example of that's going on over at the river right now with National Helium Plant. That plant is going to have a value of, depending on who you listen to, you know, they told us 180, but I've seen things in the paper that said 300 million. But anyway, it's things like that come to your community, you know, that, you know, not only industry, but small business and homes and those kind of things. You know, we've got a good example of that that's going to help with these new homes that this group's building over here in the southeast part of Liberal. So just think about building your economy and building your tax base, and that will help in lowering your
That's
taxes.
time, Candidate Rice. Each candidate will now have 30 seconds to rebut, starting with Candidate Francis.
Again, nobody likes a tax increase. We all want something for nothing. When you build homes, you have kids, they have to be educated, you have to have police officers. Again, you know, I mean, we've got a three-legged stool, and we just have to decide what portion of our taxes we want to come from which three of those things. And if it's not income tax, then it has to come from property tax, or it has to come from sales tax, or we have to have a drastic cut in services.
Thank you, Candidate Francis. Candidate Rice, you have 30 seconds.
You know, my idea in that economic development and building that tax base is not going to come overnight. It's kind of like the income tax and the industry that they're planning on coming to town, you know, or coming to your community or whoever's community across the state. That's not going to happen in a year or two. It's going to take some time to do it. So in the meantime, you have to watch your taxes and do what we've been doing up there this afternoon, going through those budgets and trying to hold it down as best as possible.
Thank you, Candidate Rice. You're listening to Talk Radio 1270, KSCB AM Liberal. Our next question, we will start with Candidate Rice. Candidate Rice, you have 1 minute to respond. What have you done for economic development in the city of Liberal and in Seward County?
Oh, you know, when I think back, I think we've tried to do things to help the community. I think perhaps tourism is something that everybody kind of overlooks. We've, supported the Dorothy's House and the Coronado Museum, that National Helium plant out there I was talking about. We've offered some tax incentives, got those guys to build a new plant out there. I can't really think of, other things that we've done right offhand, but, kind of talk a little bit more about that tourism. We've got a giant industry there that could bring instant cash to town if we were to work that right. We're the western gateway to the state of Kansas, and we need to promote that idea. And that cash is available. If you don't believe that, there's 14,000 people
That is
come
time,
out there
Candidate Rice.
every year.
All right, same question to Candidate Francis.
You know, I've worn two hats in this community, one as a county commissioner and one as a private individual. So we'll talk first about on the county commission. On the county commission, I led a task force that went out to California to recruit dairies. I think we're starting to see the success of the dairy recruitment in southwestern Kansas with the growth in dairies, the cheese factory in Hugoton. There's also talk now about a milk factory coming to Liberal because the milk production's coming up. It was a little ahead of our time. There was a lot of resentment about that, but I think it's shown its worth. Also, when the Conestoga Energy Plant got started, we said yes. We helped them get with the state. We gave them their initial grant. We made sure that they had some infrastructure to go forward. I built 90 houses for this town. I've started 2 or 3 businesses myself. I know what it takes to make a small business work in western Kansas.
That is time, Candidate Francis. Each candidate will now have 30 seconds to rebut, starting with Candidate Rice.
I'll pass.
Candidate Francis, you have 30 seconds.
Sometimes we have to learn how to say yes when we're not sure whether something's going to work or not. We haven't seen the effect of it yet, but some people came to me about the High Plains cotton warehouse at the very beginning. I was instrumental in that because I want that to be a seed that grows. As our water declines, cotton is an alternative crop that can be profitable to our local farmers. It may be 20 years before that happens. But also, the tax abatements just came off of that, and I believe they're going to be
That is time, Candidate
$175,000 this year.
Francis. All right, thank you, candidates, for your answer on that question.